Okay. Well, here we are on a Monday evening, and we are here with another live coaching session. In fact, this is session number 4, and tonight's topic is expectations, what they can and can't do for you financially, in your health, and sexually. And so we're going to be talking about that tonight, and I hope that if you're joining me, that you'll participate in the discussion that we're going to have about expectations. And you can participate by making a comment. If you're here on the live video with us, then make a comment by putting a comment in the chat session there. If you're, on the other hand, watching the video, well, share a comment or a question for that matter about expectations. Share a comment or a question in the comments section, and so that you can participate along with us. Just a moment here, because I'm also on my as I'm getting this all going and rolling here. I usually come on here a few minutes early, wait for people to get notifications so they can join us, and as that happens, then my head is still going, and so I keep a pen and some paper handy so I can always write down some notes myself. So let me make a quick note here. Okay, then. And so we'll see who's going to be joining us here tonight. I've really enjoyed doing these live coaching sessions every week, where basically I coach you on anything that is involved in reinventing your life so that you can live the life of your dreams, having a sexually liberated, ethical, and consensual, non-monogamous life in where you're increasing your abundance, your liberation, and your freedom in your financials aspect of your life, also in your health and in your sex life. And that those are the three focuses that I usually try to take and be talking on, and also that our nonprofit association is helping to guide people towards having a sexually liberated, ethical, and consensual, non-monogamous lifestyle that increases in abundance, liberation, and freedom financially, in health, and also with your sex life. And so that's why then we're going to be talking about this term on this word expectations tonight, and oftentimes when it comes to money, then expectations is a really big deal. I mean, whether you're employed and you have expectations on your job, that'll make a difference as to how pleased and how happy you are in your job, and also how well you're going to end up doing your job. If you have expectations that you're going to go in there and be a go-getter, and you're going to get rewarded for being a go-getter, and then suddenly you go in there and you find that I'm doing everything right, doing everything I need to do, I'm working really hard, I'm being faithful and honest, and this could be true with your marriage as well. And yet I'm not getting the reward that I want. And I'm not getting the reward that I want. And yet the people that I see around me that are getting rewards that they want, they're not following the rules and towing the line like I am. And so if you have if you have an expectation then that is met with results that are dismal and disappointing results, then that's going to start to impact your behavior. So we'll be talking a little bit about expectations and how they do impact behaviors as well. And so we thank you very much for joining us. But let me go ahead and get started here by introducing myself. My name is Non-Monogamous Mark. I'm the co-founder and executive director of Non-Monogamous Lifestyles Association. And we help people who are interested in or curious about or who are transitioning to or wanting to explore and experience or already living an ethically and consensually non-monogamous lifestyle. There are many different shades of an ECNM life. And so we find that instead of trying to identify, this aspect of non-monogamy, for instance, maybe it's a swinger. or maybe it's a couple that has a friend with benefits, or maybe it's a polyamorous couple. Maybe there's emotions allowed to be involved, or maybe there's not emotions allowed to be involved, and it's just all about the sex. There's lots of different variations, lots of different shades, what we call like lots of different shades of an ethically and consensually non-monogamous lifestyle. And so, therefore, what we do is we just simply realize, instead of having to identify all the different shades and talk about all of them individually, that we then talk about an ECNM lifestyle. And so, if you are curious about or interested in or kind of wanting to explore and experience, or also if you are maybe all transitioning to the process of transitioning, or you're already living an ECNM lifestyle, then we provide tools and helps to you. And one of the things we're doing right now is we have a coaching program, but we are doing 9 weeks of live coaching so that you can come here every week, and there's no agenda. The questions that you ask and the comments that you make, or like there's some individual that texts me directly. He's on our email list, and because when people get on my email list, then they get my personal contact information as well. And so there's one person that texts me directly, and sometimes I'll get then the subject for the night's workshop or discussion will be based upon the conversation that we've had, or be based upon a question. So there's no agenda that I'm bringing to the Monday night coaching sessions. It's all led and directed by you. So I hope that you'll come here prepared with your questions and ready to go. So let's go ahead and talk about this whole area of expectations. You see, because in your journey of being and living an ethically and consensually non-monogamous life, one of the things that we try to show you and teach you is the fact that if you're going to live an ethically and consensually non-monogamous life, if you're going to live a sexually liberated non-monogamous life, then you are going to be very intentional in doing that. That's not something because of the norms of our society. That's not something that just happens and by circumstance, and it's something that at some point along the line you end up making an intentional choice. Now, the first time something happens, maybe you're with a coworker, and I've known these situations to take place. You're with a coworker, you've spent a lot of time, the two of you like each other, you're on a business trip, and you end up in the bar, drinking a little bit, having a good time, and then you go to each other's hotel room together. And you're both married, and you're monogamous, and your relationship, you may be good or may not be good at all, or you may be in love or you may not be in love, but nonetheless, then you know that as a monogamous individual, that where your partner, your spouse, or your girlfriend or boyfriend for that matter, is kind of expecting that you're going to be able to toe the line and have this what we call faithfulness, when you're out there on those business trips or at any time. And so so there's that expectation, and because you're monogamous, and so then you ended up in a situation where you allow that to happen, but it wasn't something that you were planning on, and it wasn't something that you expected to happen. It just kind of happened, and you ended up in bed with a coworker or someone you met at the bar or whatever. And so with those kinds of situations, though, yes, you're not being intentional necessarily at that moment, but then you meet the moment of intention, and when you start to face the decision, is this something I want to continue with, or is this something I want to stop? And so if you're living a life that's ethically and consensually non-monogamous, that means it's unlike what I just described. You're not cheating on your spouse. You're open and you're honest with your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your husband, your wife, the people in your relationship with. that you're going to be telling them, hey, I've got another relationship over here that I'm involved with as well. And so that's being ethical and consensually non-monogamous instead of unethically and non-consensually non-monogamous. And so one of the things that along your journey of creating this intentional life, if I've known people, for instance, they in a work environment, a work situation, they cheated on their spouse, and it's something that they maybe in their fantasies have talked about with their spouse. Or I know someone right now is going through a little bit of a struggle, because I get a lot of people messaging me, and this struggle they're going through is the guy and his wife. They talk about having a threesome, but he really doesn't think that his wife would ever go through with it. It's just strictly in his fantasies. Well, for the last 2 years, he's been surfing the net wanting to get involved in threesomes. And so with he and his wife, they talk about it in their fantasies, but it's almost like because they are monogamous, there's this expectation that then it's to remain in their fantasy world and not something that's actually acted on. And so that's an expectation. And so once you take and reach a point, though, that you think to yourself, I just can't go on living like this, where I've got these hopes and these desires out there where I'm trying to meet these expectations in my monogamous life. And so you come to a place where you decide that it's time to make a change. And that's where expectations can be a powerful tool in the toolbox that we have in our ethically and consensually non-monogamous life. And the expectations are oftentimes can be the precursor to a tremendous change in your life. And that expectation then is just where you reach a point where you decide that I need to do something about my life and take it down in a different direction, what have you. And so that's what we're talking about expectations tonight, though, is that the idea that expectations can be a very powerful tool in your toolbox in order to have the financially, the dreams of your life financially, or also the health of your life financially, or also the sex life that you would desire to have. And so your expectations in all of these areas is so very important. In fact, it's interesting, in doing a little bit of research for the subject here today, I came across an individual that when he was a little child, he came down with cerebral palsy. And as a child with cerebral palsy, there's lots of difficulties, lots of challenges in that person's life. And he worked his life all the way through school, through grade school and middle school and then high school and then into college, taking one item at a time and deciding that he was going to overcome many of the difficulties that the cerebral palsy brought to his life. And he just simply had an expectant behavior about each of those items, that he would take one item at a time, and then he would have an expectant behavior that he was going to overcome that particular item. And so, and he talked about the talk I heard him give then today. He talked about his expectant behavior in each of those items, and how it was amazing how it transformed his life, being able to be a person with cerebral palsy and being able to overcome so much in his life simply because of expectations that he had. And so we find that with expectations, that they can be the key to creating a new set of beliefs about your life so that you can change your life. See, a belief is nothing more than something that we have thought over and over and many times, or it's been fed to us and we've heard it and listened to it and then allowed that to sit on our brain without disputing it. So take that example of this young man that had or has cerebral palsy. There's lots of beliefs that people will have about his handicap. And those beliefs can be very limiting beliefs. And they can set his life on a course where he'll never discover his greatness. But fortunately for him, that's not happening. Because, and I don't know who in his life was instrumental with this. I didn't go through to learn that much about his story. I just heard this one speech that he gave about expectation, But fortunately, so at a very young age, there must have been someone there that was a great encouragement to him, and that set a different set of expectations in his head, that he didn't have to keep with society's limited beliefs about who he is because he has cerebral palsy. And that's certainly true with so many other people that have overcome many difficulties in an area of a disability. But you see, we think when it comes to disability, we think and we see people all the time that have physical disabilities. We've got the Americans with Disabilities Act, and what does that focus on? That focuses on people with physical disabilities. And yet, I think that many of us are a lot more disabled in our inner beings, in the way that we think. We keep ourselves from being able to have the abilities that we potentially could have in life because we disable ourselves through our thinking, through our words, and also through how we feel about things. This is what I talk all the time about, the energy that we produce, that we put out there, whether we choose what that energy is or we just let it kind of come along. And then we go along with whatever comes along. And so when you start to have expectant behavior, that then helps you to realize that, hey, I can have intention here, think about what it is that I want, and I can have more of the life that I want instead of the life that everybody else tells me that I should be having because of this item or this item or this item. For me, it was my religious life. And I lived that life. I was a virgin when I got married, and until I was 49 years old, I had sex with one woman in my whole life. And it was terrible. It was miserable. I was miserable because the sex wasn't good. And yet, because of the beliefs that I had these expectations that there was nothing else that I could do. Same with the conversation I had with a guy today, in fact. And his beliefs are so limited because he has the expectation that, well, my wife will never go for that. And so we have all these expectations that become limiting, and instead of expectations which become expanding. And so I want to help with this conversation tonight. I want to help you to start think about evaluating your own expectations and ask yourself, is this a limiting expectation or is this an expanding expectation? Because so many of us have expectations, but they're limiting. Their expectations, and let me put this down. We've got two different categories of expectations. We have expectations about us, and then we have expectation about others, or it could be other things. Like, for instance, here when I am doing this video, I have an expectation that this is going to go out on the internet. And anybody who wants to watch this around the world that has an internet connection and a computer and happens to land on this video, my expectation is that they're going to be able to hear me and see me. And so it's not an expectation in someone, It's an expectation in something, and that is the technology that it takes to create the ability so that I can be live on YouTube and have that, whether it be live or later as a video on YouTube, and have that be able to have something that anybody anywhere around the world who has a connection to the internet with a computer can listen to me and watch me and learn from me and think about this idea and this concept of expectations. So that's my expectations. So you can have expectations in things, you can have expectations with other people, and you can have expectations of yourself. And those expectations can be limited expectations, or they can be expansive expectations. And so oftentimes, though, we limit ourselves in the conversations that we have. And so that's where I'm going to talk a little bit about communication now. You see, my partner, Kat, this is something that she and I have been working a lot on in the last year, and it's really changed her life, and it's continuing to change her life. And that is that I believe that our expectations that we have then close the door on the conversations we have. You see, and I learned about this when I was married and monogamous and sexually so frustrated. My expectations were that I had to do certain things and I couldn't talk to my wife. In fact, it was taught to me in men's group at church that, certain things, here's a list of them. In fact, they would talk, here's the list of things that you really shouldn't talk to your wives about this, because they're going to go ahead and they're going to judge you, and they're just going to think you're a bad, awful person. They're going to reject you, and you don't want to create bad feelings with your wife towards you. And so this list of things here, you don't want to talk to your wife about. Bring those to men's group, and we'll help you fix those problems. And one of those issues was sexual desires for having sex with other people. And so I didn't have desires necessarily for having sex with other people. I just wanted to have really great sex. And when I was a youth and still a virgin, I had an expectation that sex was going to be spectacular. And it wasn't. When I got married, and it was far short of spectacular. And yet I still continued to hear so much about it that I thought, okay, well, other people must be having sex that's spectacular. How come I am not having sex that's spectacular? And I spent 25 years of my marriage trying to solve that problem. But it was because I had the wrong expectations. I had to start to change my expectations. And my expectation then was, again, from the first year of marriage, where I learned in men's group, you can't talk to your wife about these things. And so many people have that expectation. Or how about what you can talk and discuss with your kids? Oh, no, I can't discuss my sex life with my kids. We can keep it in generic terms, and but we can't make it personal. I can't let them know that I really like using toys and vibrators, or I can't let them know that I kind of like to be, caned or flogged, and or I like a little bit of BDSM, or I like a little bit of pain, or whatever. Whatever your kinks are. Why we have these expectations that we can't talk to our kids about these things. And so with Kat, that's over the last year, one of the things that I've worked on with her and that we've worked on together is communication, because it's our expectations that limit our ability to communicate with people. And so whether that be our ability to communicate as two people, for instance, with me and my now deceased ex-wife, and that I had that expectation. There was these things that I just couldn't talk about, and that expectation made it so that it was for certain that it built these walls that gotten big. They got bigger and bigger and bigger, and by the time that I had been married for 15 years, well, we can't go over those walls. They're just too big. They're impossible. And that's the conversation that I had with this guy today, was that he's got this wall now built up in his life that is so big. He has wishes, but he lives a life of quiet desperation. And for the last 2 years, then he's had all these fantasies, and he spends all this time on the internet and trying to connect with people that's really just out of his quiet desperation. And he's just growing his misery is what he's doing. And yet the kinds of comments that he will use is, well, easier said than done. And that's goes back to this whole area of energy that I spend so much time trying to talk about. I'm reminded of a sermon that I once heard, or the sermon the pastor talks about. He says, well, I gave the same sermon for 5 weeks in a row. And then finally, somebody said to me after 4 weeks, he said, well, preacher, you're giving the same sermon now that we've heard 3 times already, and here we are the 4th time, and you're giving the same sermon. And the preacher says, when people actually start to hear the sermon and they start to apply what I'm talking about to their lives and make changes in their lives, then I guess that's the time I'll finally be able to stop preaching the same sermon. But until then, I guess I'll have to keep preaching the same sermon. And so he preached the same sermon the 4th week. And the 5th week, he preached the same sermon. And then people started to get it. And they started to make changes that impacted their lives. And so that is what it is with this whole idea of energy. I keep coming back to, in fact, one of the people that I'm communicating with and has been watching some of the videos, and she's struggling with some things, and she says, well, but you, in so many of your videos, you just kind of say the same thing sometimes. I talk about our words, our thoughts, and our feelings. I talk about the inner GPS that we all have that will guide us and will keep us on a path of finding and developing and creating the greatness that's within us. And it'll keep us in wanting to or being on that path of having a sex life that is so wonderful that we just want to tell everybody how great it is, or to be having a financial success where we just want to go out there and say, well, but don't you know that you can do this too? Or to have the health to be able to say, but why are you taking all those pills? Why do you keep going to the doctor and getting the same results? And so we have these expectations, whether they're financial expectations, whether they are medical expectations, or whether they are sexual expectations. We have these expectations that both can in a positive way and can also in a very negative way impact our life tremendously. And a lot of it has to do with the energy, because expectations have their own energy. Well, if you don't really understand that, then let me just talk about some words here for a moment. And I've got somewhere in my notes. I've not been following my notes here at all, but somewhere in my notes, let me find this here. I don't know where it is in my notes, so I'll continue talking about it without using my notes. So think about now, like I mentioned this gentleman I was been in conversation with today, and online, and he's miserable, and he's made the comments that easier said than done. And what got us in the conversation was that he first said, "I wish I had." And so, what do you think is the difference between wish and expectation? Think about the energy that word and that thought and that feeling puts out. If I say, "I wish I had your sex life," like this guy is saying, okay, is that putting out an energy that is actually going to help to create that and make that a reality in his life? Or is that creating an energy where he's really keeping that put off? I wish for something, and it just isn't possible. And that's the power of our words. If you haven't learned that from me yet, it's the power of being so careful about the words that we use and the words that we think and how we feel. Because for him to say, "I wish I had a sex life like you have. I wish I have a sex life like this, or a sex life like this." Well, that comes with a lot of feeling as well. And believe me, I understand. I am where I am at in my life today, in my non-monogamous world, because of those feelings. Because my frustrations of not being satisfied sexually, even though my wife and I tried to work so hard on that area of our marriage, and it just never came together, never happened. And so the feelings that grew from year to year to year of the dissatisfaction and the frustration, and my personality changed, where I wasn't such a nice guy always as like I used to be, because I became harsh and bitter and critical. And so something had, my feelings had to change if I want my life to become better. And that's where this area of our energy, our words, our thoughts, and our feelings, what goes with the things that we choose, the words that we choose, the thoughts that we choose, and the feelings that we have. So if I say, "I wish," well, I wish I had your life, or I wish, that's creating a negative energy. That's saying, yeah, that's something I'm not going to have. Think of things in terms of, is this a statement of abundance, or is this a statement of scarcity? Is this a statement of limitation and restriction, or a statement of abundance, or of being able to do? And so, is this a statement of suppression and repression, or is this a statement of opportunity and possibility? You see, and so when we use the words, when we talk about the word again, wish, then what side of those fences do you see that word being on? And so when you start to become aware of your words and to choose your words, and you suddenly start choosing your words all to be over here on this side of the fence. And so then you say, well, I'm not going to use that word wish anymore. another word, hope. You know, you might use a statement, or I would oftentimes make a statement in communicating with people. Well, I hope you have a good day. And I hope you have a good day, or anything where you would use the word hope. That again, what side of the fence is that on? That's already assuming then that they may not be having a good day. And instead of giving them a words that have energy with them that are going to actually help them to have a good day, you might say, hey, well, I know it's been really tough for the first couple hours of your day today, but I expect that things are going to be different for you now. What's the difference? What's the different energy that has it for you? How about when you're thinking again, we can, this idea of expectations, we can have these expectations on ourselves, and we can have these expectations on other people, and we can have these expectations on things. And so when you have that expectation then on yourself, that might, how's your day? Well, it's going okay. I hadn't thought about it. Or it's going good. When I get up in the morning, and people know that it's a rare occasion that when I get up or when I wake up that I am on the wrong side of the tracks, on the negative side of the tracks. When I'm there, I know it instantly, and right away I generally will go into going into meditation, because I know that just, okay, man, I woke up and I just feel negative today, and I know that I'm in the wrong place, and I've got to get myself in a better place. And before I go anywhere to start my day, I'm going to get myself in a better place, because 99% of the time, or probably even 99.5% of the time, maybe one day out of 200 days, so maybe 2 days a year, I'll wake up in the morning and just be on that wrong side. So the other times, I'm waking up in the morning and I'm expectant that it's going to be a great day. I'm expectant that I'm going to feel good. Now, here lately, that's been a very important thing for me. You see, because I'm in Seattle right now, and I'm preparing to get my house ready to sell and put on the market in the next 4 weeks. And I'm moving then to another house that I own. And I'm doing a lot of kind of work things that I'm typically not used to doing, particularly with my shoulders, where I've gotten a car accident 2 years ago and injured my shoulders, and I'm still, living every day with pain from my shoulders. And I don't really, at this point, I don't have a lot of choice about, the things that need to be done. It's like I can't hire them to be done. I don't have the money to pay someone to come and do that right now. And so it means that I just got to get the job done. And I depend on myself. And so I started it, I guess, when I got started in this process, I start out with this expectation then that I'm going to have pain. You see, because one of the things I know about expectations as well is that, like athletes, when an athlete trains themselves expecting that they're going to have pain, then that pain doesn't shut them down, and they're able to keep going past and through the pain onto their victory. Whether the victory for them is to complete the race or the athletic event, or whether it is to win the event, whatever it is. But when they expect that they're going to have pain, then when the pain comes along, then they just keep going, because that's what they expected was going to happen. Now, athletes weren't always trained that way. And the highest level athletes today, that's how they're trained. They're trained to expect pain. But it wasn't always that way. And lower level athletes certainly don't get this professional level of training. And so they don't have that expectation that, okay, there's going to be pain. And so what happens then is when they experience pain, they start to shut down. And instead of having that expectation that, okay, I know it's going to happen and I'm going to do good anyway, they start to do worse and shut down. And so when I started in this process of working on the daily physical work that I do on the house here, about 2-3 months ago, my expectation was that I was going to have pain. And sure enough, you know what happened? I had pain. I had lots of pain every day, and some days I really couldn't. I had to take a day or two from doing physical work because the pain was too much. And so I just had to cut back a little bit, allow my body time to recover. And so I expected pain and I got pain. But then as I started to get into this process, then I started to shift my expectation. And my expectation started becoming for less pain. And my expectation is that I'm going to go to bed at night and my body is going to do all the things that it is made to do because I give it good, healthy food and nutritionally, and I try to take good care of this body. And so because of that, then I'm going to expect that when I get up tomorrow morning, I'm not going to roll out of bed in this with starting my day with this incredible amount of pain. And instead, I'm going to expect that I'm going to be able to recover overnight, and I'm going to get up the next day, and I'm going to expect that I'm going to be at my normal low level of pain. And so, sure enough, that's what began to happen. And then here recently, in the last 2 weeks, again, my expectation shifted. And that is that I started expecting that I'm going to have less pain. And you know what? I'm experiencing a lot less pain in the work that I'm doing. So in other words, I'm able then to do actually a little more and not experience the high degree of pain that I was experiencing. And it's because of my expectation shifted. But it all started with that first expectation of the fact that I'm going to expect that I'm going to have pain. And then I went to my second expectation, and that is that I'm going to expect that my body is going to recover overnight, because that's what our bodies are designed to do. And then I went with my third expectation, and that is I'm going to start expecting to have less pain and be able to do more with my body. And so when you start to learn how to use expectations in your life, then it's a sometimes a graduated process. Going back to my years of monogamy, and where my pain grew in that I was so frustrated sexually and I wanted to have a wonderful sexual experience. And I didn't want to go to the grave dying and not having had a great sex life. And so as that pain grew, and my wife and I, we finally gave up trying to work on it after our 20th year of working on it all. For 20 years we worked on it. And we did lots of different things. That's in other videos. We did lots of different things, and it just didn't fix the problem. And so we stopped working on it. And by the time that 25 years came around, I said, okay, I'm willing to risk getting a divorce. And so what happened is my expectation changed. I no longer expected to be married till death do us apart. Because I thought to myself, I'm not willing to be this sexually frustrated and go to my grave never having been able to explore and enjoy a lovely, wonderful sex life. And so because of that expectation then, that I had to change my whole view on this part of marriage that says, till death do you apart. And I had to be willing then to take some risk because my expectation changed. And my expectation then was that, okay, can it really be all that bad if I end up getting divorced? Certainly it can't be as bad as the misery that I live in with a sexual dissatisfaction and frustration. Now, my wife and I had really a decent relationship with the fact that we had some issues. Like she wouldn't never really talk to me, and we didn't have communication was terrible, and sex was terrible. But we functioned well together as long as I made enough money that she could enjoy doing the things that she enjoyed doing. And I found satisfaction in making the money. And so it was just fine until I reached the point where I just wasn't going to continue being willing to not enjoy myself sexually. And for that to happen, then that meant that I had to have sex with someone else because I couldn't possibly see how it was going to be possible for my wife and I ever to enjoy ourselves sexually in the ways that I wanted to, because we had worked on it and we had tried and done all kinds of things for 20 years. And so my expectations then shifted. My expectation first was the fact that, yeah, I wasn't, after 20 years and we gave up, my expectation was that, okay, this is not going to happen with my wife. For 20 years, I expected it to happen with my wife. But then my expectation changed. And when my expectation changed, that change was, okay, it's not going to happen with my wife. And that led to me starting to think, well, for 5 years, I thought, well, wait a minute, am I willing, just in order to not be divorced, am I willing to go to my grave without ever enjoying the what I hear that other people and understand the other people are enjoying sexually? Am I willing to go to my grave? No, I'm not. And so that means that my expectation is no longer till death do us apart, because I'm going to have some conversation with my wife, see if we can do something so I can have sex with someone else. We open our marriage. Well, and so sure enough, for the first year, she says, I'm going to divorce you. I said, well, but why? I haven't had sex with anybody yet. All I'm doing is talking to you. And I wouldn't go and have sex behind your back. But yes, we're either going to get a divorce because I'm going to go out and have sex with someone then that I'm going to have a wonderful experience with, or we're going to have an open marriage. And so after a year, she says, okay, we can give this open marriage thing a try, but we've got to work some things out first. And then we spent a year working things out. And so the expectations changed gradually, and there was this graduated process bringing about the change. So the same thing happens financially in our lives. So again, it doesn't matter if we're talking about our financial life or our health or our sex life, is that you start to change your expectations. And as you change your expectations, then they bring a new reality into your life, because your expectations will create your realities. And so it brings a new reality in your life, and you'd say, okay, well, for me, again, that expectation was going from, my wife's going to be the person that I'm going to experience this with, and then it went to where she's not, and then it went to where I've got to talk to her And, but she and I don't really talk about these kinds of things. And so I had to keep changing my expectation and then creating a new reality as I created that new expectation. And once I created that new reality, I was able to take and create a new expectation that I had. And so there's a process here, and it's a graduated process. In order to make the expectations, in order to have the expectations in your life to go take you through this graduated process to get you where you want to be to live the dream life that you want to have, whether that be financially, with your health, or with your sex, or with all of it. We'll talk about financially. Is your expectation that you're not going to ever make another $10,000 more than you're making right now? So if you're making, let's say, $50,000, are you expecting to make $60,000 anytime soon? If you aren't, then that's the reality that you're creating. But once you then change your expectation, then you start to create a new reality for yourself, because you'll start to create an energy of optimism instead of pessimism. No, I can't make $60,000. I'm only making $50,000, and I'm kind of peaked out at that. But once you create this expectation, in fact, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make $70,000, and that's what I'm going to do. By God, I'm going to make $70,000. I'm going to do it by this date. Now, there's a lot of information out there, and can't go into the time to do on this video about this, but don't get caught up in the whys. And the whys, not the whys. Don't get caught up in the hows, because the how to do something comes to the person that first believes they can do it. And the person who believes they can do it knows why they want to do it. And so when it comes to making another $20,000 a year, then when you start to believe it, by setting yourself that positive expectation, then you start looking for the possibilities. 2 weeks ago, I believe it was, I told the story about my wife and I when I was in my 20s, walking on the beach in Maui, and we're staying at the Marriott for 2 weeks on a vacation there on Maui, and walk along the beach though, but I just wasn't, I had my sights set on where I wanted to be and be headed and going. When I got out of college and all, and it wasn't happening. And so I just didn't feel like I was on track. I felt that I was off track. And I didn't want to stay off track. I wanted to get on track with things. And so I told my wife, I says, to get things on track with what I want to accomplish financially, I'm going to have to start maybe keeping an open mind to things. Because at that point, I had an expectation that I was going to take and create the income of my dreams through the business that I was creating at that time. But it just wasn't happening. And I had probably been, I was probably, I'm going to guess, 5 years, maybe 6 years into that business. And it wasn't on track for getting me where I wanted to go. And so I had to change my expectation that, okay, does that mean then I'm going to expect less and I'm just going to live because I'm making a good income and I'm doing well? And is that then going to become my new expectation? And I'm going to not expect to be able to have the life of my dreams? So that's a limited expectation then, you see. And I don't want limited expectations. I want to be on the other side of the fence, where I create this energy about me, where I draw the things that are necessary in my life to then actually make my dreams come true. And so financially then, I said to my wife, I says, I guess that maybe I need to keep my eyes open for other business possibilities. And it was less than a year from that I got involved in building a business, and it took the skills that I had developed from this other business for, like, I guess 6 or 7 years in developing skills. And then I got involved in a business that I utilized those skills that weren't working for me in the other business. But I had developed this group of skills, and I took those skills and applied it to this new business, and I just thrived. And it took off because I created a new expectation. That expectation was that, yes, I'm going to still be on track with making the kind of money that I want to make to live the dream life that I want to live, but it may have to happen with a different vehicle. And so that's where sometimes people put all their expectations, or maybe you're looking for a new job and you're putting your expectations on a particular job that you're trying to go after, instead of saying that's putting your expectations on the bloody house, as Mike Dooley likes to call it. Right now, one of the homework assignments that I've given out is to listen to this audiobook. And it's by Mike Dooley, and he talks about the bloody house. We get caught up in the house instead of getting caught up in the whys. Well, why do I want to make more money? Or why do I now not want to make more money? And say, well, no, when I get caught up in the house, you see, I'd say, well, I'm just not making it, so I guess I'll just reduce my expectation. But I didn't want to reduce my expectation. And so, therefore, I stayed on track, but I realized I needed a different vehicle. Same thing then with my sex life that I described just moments ago with my wife, that, okay, I guess she wasn't the vehicle for me to experience the sexual life that I wanted to experience. And so I had to have a different vehicle. That meant if I was going to stay married, that meant I was going to have an open marriage. And I didn't have a word for it then, didn't realize that there was non-monogamy and there was ethical and consensual non-monogamy. I never knew about this world. My past life, it was like, boy, people who were involved in anything like that, they're just dirty perverts. And then I learned that they're not. And so, same thing with your health. I remember going to the doctor when I was in my early 20s, and my cholesterol was over 400. It's like through the roof. And he comes back and he says, his first cholesterol test that I ever had, because they had just come out, it was a big deal then. They came out with this cholesterol screening test, and everybody was getting their cholesterol checked. And so I went in for my annual physical, and I got my cholesterol checked, and it was over 400. And he says, well, based upon your family history, you're just going to have to go on this medication for the rest of your life, because otherwise you're going to have a heart attack before you're 30. Well, did I want a heart attack before I was 30? I certainly didn't. But did I want to be on a medication the rest of my life? I didn't. And so you see, his expectation was that there was no other options. I didn't have that expectation. I had the expectation that I can find other options. And so I went out looking for them. And as I looked for them, I found them. And my cholesterol dropped. And today my cholesterol is great. I don't have a cholesterol problem. Same thing with people that are on high blood pressure medication. Same thing with people who are diabetic. So, whatever you want to refer to and talk to about your health, maybe you've got heart disease going on. Well, food is medicine. I don't know if you understand that and you realize that, but food is medicine. And if you're eating the wrong foods, you're taking the wrong medicine. If you're eating the right foods, you can heal many of the bad things in your body. And so there's a lot of information out there. Just start searching that. But if you have the expectation that you're going to be sick, or the expectation that you're going to have cancer, or the expectation that you're going to have heart disease or diabetes or high cholesterol, or that you're going to be overweight, whatever your expectation is, then you're creating that reality. And so I don't care what area of life that you want to apply this concept of expectation to, whether it be your sex life, whether it be your health, your financial life. This idea of expectation is a powerful tool to have in your toolbox. But so many people misuse, they abuse that tool because they're on the other side of the fence and their expectations are negative expectations instead of creating positive expectations. Instead of then having an expectant behavior, like I talked about that gentleman that overcame so much with his cerebral palsy. Now, did he overcome everything? No. But he went through this list of all of the things that he overcame, and it was just absolutely amazing. And people that have cerebral palsy would oftentimes live with the thought that, well, you can't do that. You've got cerebral palsy. You can't overcome that. But he had different expectations. And so whether you're talking about your health, you're talking about your financial life, you're talking about your sex life, your expectation could be a powerful tool against you, or it can be a powerful tool for you. And so however you end up using this tool of expectation, I hope it serves you well. And this is how I started to really think about expectation. And see, my wife and I had this friend. Years ago, my wife, she would go to work and she'd ride the bus to work in downtown Seattle, and she'd come home at the end of the day. And she'd want to drag me out to the mall and just go looking around. Didn't even necessarily want to go buying anything. Just wanted to just look around, and she wanted to, just get out more often than what I wanted. And I just told her, I says, well, you need a friend. You need someone to get out with, of course, and that meant a female friend. Not anybody that she would ever have sex with either. And so she ended up meeting this woman on the bus, just on the next stop from where she got on the bus. And this woman, her name's Susan. And Susan was single at that point. And she wanted to get married. And she wanted to be married to a particular specific kind of individual. And so she had created that expectation. And she then fulfilled that expectation. Now, there was some other things along that happened with that make it interesting as too. I won't get into a long story here, but the thing that I started to notice about Susan is that she led a life of high expectations, of positive expectations. And things had happened in her life that I'd say, well, how's she going to do that? Financially, things happened in her life. But I'd say, well, how is she going to do that? And I was amazed. I mean, she was a friend, became my wife's best friend, and I knew her, but I didn't know her well, and so she was my wife's best friend for 20, 25 years before my wife, 30 years probably before my wife passed away, probably 25 years. And so they were best friends. And I was just amazed how Susan lived her life expecting things. And I would say, how is she going to do that? And just observing this over 20 years, I learned the power a positive expectation by the life and example that she would provide. And she would just say what she was going to do. And I would then have a lot of disbelief. Well, yeah, that's going to happen. You know, I have all this disbelief. And then guess what? It happened. She moved to she lived here in Seattle where we met her, but then her parents lived in New Hampshire. And as her dad died and her mom got elderly, she wanted to move back home. And so she moved back home, and then she was miserable because she didn't like the cold and the snow in the winter months and the isolation and all that. And she said she came back here for a visit to Seattle. And she's a school teacher. And by that time, she was a single woman and living just on her school teacher's income. Now, not only was she a school teacher, she was a private Christian school teacher, which they got paid about 30 to 40% less than a public school teacher. And so she got paid significantly less. But she wanted to teach in the Christian school system that she was teaching in, and therefore she was willing to sacrifice the pay to do that. And so she came back for a visit from New Hampshire, and she says, I'm going to move back to Seattle next summer. And I looked, I said to my wife, we had many conversations. She's not going to do that. She doesn't have the money to do that. How is she going to do that? But you know what? She did it. And it was because of that expectation. She helped her to realize that she didn't need all the crap that she acquired, and that when she moved to New Hampshire, she had to hire a moving van to go and spend $15,000 to move all that crap. And so she decided it was okay to get rid of all that stuff and move back to Seattle because that's really what she wanted. And then she decided that she wanted her job back. Now, they had hired someone to replace her, but she wanted her job back. Her job was an English teacher at a high school, a Christian high school. But she wanted her job back. And so she said, I'm going to come back to Seattle and I'm going to get my job back. So then the next summer, sure enough, she comes back to Seattle. Well, you got a job yet? No, don't have a job yet, but I'm going to get my job back. Well, but they hired someone else. You didn't get that memo? And it's like, they don't necessarily need another English teacher, They're not just going to add a new staff position as an English teacher. But she had such a positive expectation. I don't know how it happened. But she got her job back like a week before school. And she was offered her job back. And so I started saying, I cannot believe this woman. But her life was lived with such positive expectation that things just happened. And so that's where I want to help you to understand that it's a powerful tool to have in your toolbox, but your expectations can work for you or they can work against you. And you get to choose how they're going to work. You can choose whether they're going to be positive expectations or negative expectations. Like we've said about other things, the first step of this is awareness. The fact that you start being aware of what my expectations are. And then you can be aware of that you can gradually shift your expectations in order to accomplish and achieve the things that you're going to achieve in your life. Instead of being like that conversation I had today where the guy is wishing, but yet at the same time, he has so much doubt and so much misery that he says, you just don't understand, Mark. I wish, but it just can never happen. And so even things then that, like I said, pay attention to the words that you use. What kind of expectation does that word have? When you say, well, I'm looking forward to it. Now you can say, well, that has positive spin to it, but it has lack. When you say I'm looking forward to it, means that I don't have it. Instead, well, you'd say, I just expect. You know, I'm looking forward to earning another $20,000. I'm looking forward to like having another woman in relationship with myself and my partner. And so if you have expectation and then don't start having doubts, because those doubts will be expectations too. You know, you create these sliding expectations in the opposite direction. Well, you know, that's just not going to happen. But yet it does happen. For people who have the right positive expectations, whatever you could possibly desire can really become a reality. You know, and I'm not going to get political on this, but I want you to go back and just think about our president. And when he decided to become president, now there's been a lot said about how he became president, in the fact that he totally expected to be president. Nobody else expected him to be president. Nobody in his own party. I mean, they were all against him. Certainly nobody that of his opponents expected he would ever be president. And then nobody ever expected that he would surely have any momentum once, I mean, after he finally got elected. And then it's like, okay, well, we're going to create such an uproar that we're going to make sure he gets impeached. We're going to make sure this and that. And nobody expected that he's going to have any clout and he's going to have any effectiveness. Now, if all you're doing is watching the news headlines, like I read the news headlines on Yahoo, and I tell you what, I watched the news headlines for a year on Yahoo and thinking that, man, that guy is in a lot of trouble. He's not accomplishing, he's not doing anything. Well, then I went and I saw this video report on his accomplishments, his first year in office. And I says, wait a minute, how did I miss this? You know, and he's fulfilling his campaign promises. He's keeping his campaign promises. How many presidents in the past have actually done that? Very few. And so now that we're heading back into election season, not presidential election season, but congressional and the Senate, the election season, there's momentum going for people that are starting to get on his camp. And I'm not trying to get political here, not saying this is good or bad, but it's because of the expectations that Donald Trump has. And the same thing with Donald Trump being a billionaire. You know, he lost $1 billion and went broke. But yet he expected to be a billionaire. And because he expected to be a billionaire, he came back as a billionaire. And so there's many other people that throughout history, if you read biographies, you'll find that expectation played a huge role in their life. And so I hope that expectations can play a huge role in your life. So thanks a lot. Probably a lot of things here in my notes I didn't get to, but I appreciate your coming along and being here with me tonight. And I'm going to encourage you to click on that link in the comments section. That'll take you to our login, our email list. Get a chance to get on our email so that you can be on our email list and we can stay in communication with you and find out what's going on with us. And yeah, like this gentleman that is texting me, you know, he got my phone number, personal phone number, because when you get on our email address or email list, if you're going to be a subscriber, allow me to communicate with you. I want to allow you to communicate with me as well. And so get on our email list and communicate with me and allow me to continue to communicate with you. Tell you about all the great things that Non-Monogamous Mark is doing with also Non-Monogamous Lifestyles Association and how we want to help you to increase the abundance, the liberation, and the freedom that you have in living the sexually liberated life of your dreams, financially, in your health, and also